Schön, dass wir heute hier zusammen sind.
It's great that we are together here today. My name is Christina Wojtanowski and I work for the Friends of Waldorf Education, which works worldwide with traumatized children and adolescents. Standing next to me is Dr. Christian Schopper. I'm delighted that we are able to present our work to you. I also work all around the world in cooperation with the organization Friends of Waldorf Education, and as a doctor and a specialist for emotional traumata, we'd like to present and explain a bit about this topic.
Was können wir jetzt als Lehrer, als
What can we do now as teachers, as social workers, so that emotional wounds in children do not become chronic, do not become infected? I'd now like to present to you a few things. What is an acute trauma? How do affected persons react to it, and which phases of processing do people affected by trauma go through? We have a major severe event which produces emotional reactions in the affected persons, like an acute infection or an acute wound, only in the soul. If we look at this from the perspective of modern trauma medicine, there is an inner freezing between the left and right brain halves during an acute trauma reaction. This means between feelings, actions and thoughts. There are then two basic differing possibilities of how a child, an adolescent, an affected person reacts. Evident in every case are people's abnormal reactions. Either they are nervous, overexcited, frantic, or they are frozen, silent, stiff, they don't move anymore, no facial expressions, lifeless. You can see these reactions right after a traumatic event in the first 1 to 2 days, what we call the acute phase. When you recognize that a child or affected person is in this phase, it's very, very important that you already start implementing interventions and helpful methods. Important to remember is that the reactions of the child or adolescent to the traumatic event are at first something very normal. We have therefore a child or adolescent who has experienced a severely traumatic event and who always displays a very specific reaction, like I've just portrayed. This acute phase then moves into the post-traumatic reaction phase, which lasts for multiple weeks. The most important thing for you as helper, teacher and parent is to prevent this acute trauma reaction and the acute reaction of the child or adolescent from turning into a trauma-related disorder, into a disordered normal processing of a difficult event. We've worked with proven methods for many, many years with pedagogical methods in order to bring children stability and peace in chaotic situations. The interventions we do differ based on the age of the children and adolescents. A pubescent adolescent must be reached in a very different way in the workshops than a preschool-aged child, with whom we can work much more in the group playfully and collectively. This means that all of our interventions are age-specific and therefore also respective of and specific to the developmental phase of the child. We attempt to offer children a structure, which is the same every day, meaning we would like to build a daily structure which is always the same for the children. We always start the day together in a circle every morning or afternoon, depending on the day's start time. This way, the children know what happens every day and can adjust themselves to it. Because what have they experienced in a trauma, in a traumatic situation? They've experienced chaos, they've experienced insecurity, they've experienced not knowing what will happen next. After this circle, where the children can also experience themselves together, they then go to the workshops. A workshop can, for example, be on the topic of rhythm. In our bodies, we have many different rhythms. We have our breathing rhythms, we have our circulatory system. And this rhythmic system, this is what we attempt to reach in our work. Let's turn our attention now to a rhythm workshop. Here there are many, but also very simple exercises. This looks at first very simple, but for traumatized children, it's often not easy at all, especially when the exercise additionally goes in a circle. And I, as the person in the middle of the circle, naturally also see how the other children are doing this exercise. That means I empathize in that moment with these other children and do the exercise in my mind. This is also, again, a type of group processing. And with this, we try to give children feeling for their body's back. Where's my left leg? Where is my right leg? With these really very simple exercises, which as we observe are not really so easy to do. But with time, the children relearn how to use their bodies to do them. This means that affected persons can no longer integrate actions, different actions and feelings. When we do rhythmic actions and, for example, clapping, we bring these two elements together again. This means we imitate what the heart does in a healthy state. This helps the affected person to be able to once again, with their own concentration, design these rhythms, an ability they lose after a trauma. But it is also important to give the children moments of quiet and rest. They find these, for example, during artistic activities, by painting, drawing, painting with watercolors. There they can dive into the colors. They can express non-verbally what they've experienced. Pictures are often mirrors of the soul, and especially free painting, free drawing, when no topic is prescribed. Here, children can express what emotions they have in their souls, what they perhaps cannot say aloud. But it naturally always depends on what materials you have on site. If there's no paper, no watercolors, then you must think of other ideas. Possibilities are, for example, sculpting with mud. This is also a way for children to express their inner emotional experiences. The child can, through the artistic activities, find a way in again and already begins to directly process their traumatic experiences. This means artistic work in the early stage is an opportunity for directly coping with the trauma. Like we've heard, an emotional trauma is an inner shock, a frozen state. And with movement exercises, we would like to attempt to dissolve this inner emotional stiffness. And also here, we do this in a setting with, say, 20, 30, 40 children in a room. It can also take place under a tree. There, we do everything that has to do with movement. This helps children to re-emerge from their frozen state. We have the head, perception and concentration. We have the rhythmic system, having done rhythmic pedagogy, and we have the limbs, where it is all about movement. When this works, when the child comes back into movement, it's the most important, most elementary possibility for the child to again sense his body and flesh, for the child to come again into experiencing the body, because the child, especially the small child, is at home in movement. This can again be clapping movements, it can be dancing, it can be songs. They can be very individual and regionally specific, the songs and dances of the local culture. You can, for example, use folk dances. Children often have coordination problems after a trauma. Left-right coordination, equilibrium, balance. They are often disturbed. We attempt with these trauma pedagogical methods to restore this equilibrium with very simple exercises, which though often represent a very big challenge for the children. During these exercises, I must really know where I am and what is with me. But with time, the children can relearn this. Through these very simple coordination exercises, the child is able to repossess its body and feel again very normally at home in his body. This is an early intervention which can serve to increase the chances that a child survives a traumatic experience undamaged long term. Traumatic reactions can be infectious. They can spread to other people. We must naturally ask ourselves how we can protect helpers from these reactions. And this is really the most important thing, that we as helpers are very familiar with the environment in which we work, and that we are the guarantors for peace, stability and safety in every situation. These are 2 points that are important to me. One is that you always try to work in a team. This ensures that you receive reflection, understanding and empathy from others for what you do. And the second is that it is naturally important that what we do in trauma pedagogy with the affected children and adolescents, that you try to implement these core principles into yourself, into your life, and try to put them into practice. For example, rhythm, healthy living, and communal handling and solidarity actions. Very important is also that you as an affected person and as a helper pay attention to your personal emotions and reactions. Try not to be cold and professional, but rather try to always put your emotions into your actions and always be there as a whole person and as a helper. The most important thing is that you recognize that your child or adolescent has experienced a trauma, and that the most important things which a child must experience in the first days, from a trauma therapeutic and pedagogical perspective, are the three classic important points: safety, protection, and support. Usually, we have no specialist on site in your country. That means we can and must carry out direct therapeutic interventions together with you using very simple methods of trauma pedagogy.